What's up, guys? It's Josh from Soul Studios. I'm back today to do a comparison between the Chandler RS660 and the RS124. I know many of you are probably like me if you're a big fan and an owner of the RS124. When you heard about the RS660, probably one of your first thoughts was, how do they compare? Especially because the RS660 has been marketed as not just a straight up Fairchild clone, but that it would be the natural progression from that Beatles era where they were using 660s and RS124s alongside one another. Now, keep in mind, this is going to be way less scientific, way less calibrated and dialed in as some of my hardware versus plug-in shootouts. And the reason being, these aren't the same thing. And so we're going into this with an understanding that these are different pieces. We're going to try to play to both of their strengths as best we can, because this is not like this one's way better. These are just tools that we have available to us. And what I really want to do is give you sound examples here, because if you're in the market for one or the other, maybe you're like me, you can't necessarily afford to keep them both right now. I hope this will give you some information to base a good decision off of which one may work best for you until further down the line where you would eventually like to own both of them. All right, so we're going to take The Wire Act 1 by Joey Barnes, which is what I did the full RS660 review on. We're going to start with the RS660 because that is what was dialed in before, and we're going to see how closely we can match that with the RS124. All right, so let's see what we can do on the RS124 now. So surprisingly, the RS124 sounds more aggressive to me. This is completely the opposite of what I thought would happen. So I'm going to try to push the 660 a little harder. I think probably what's happening here is that even on the fastest setting, the RS124 is going to be slower. We're still not limiting. Even in superfuse mode, it's a more aggressive sound, but it's still compressing, not really getting into the limiting territory. So let's try to push the 660 a bit harder and see if we can get closer to matching the aggressiveness that we have out of the RS124 here. All right, so they're closer now in the overall excitement and energy. I mean, they're both cool. It would just be a matter of what you want to pick. I hope that gives you a good sense of how they could work, push pretty hard on a parallel drum bus. This is an application where I've loved using RS124s over the years, plugins or hardware. I'm actually surprised at how aggressive it could get. So I'll go ahead and commit these and then we'll check out bass. If I recall correctly, on the 660 video, I wound up in one of the slower places, which wasn't surprising because, again, keep in mind like 5, 6, and 7 are where you're supposed to get into RS124 territory. And again, bass is one of my favorite places to use in RS124. So I want you to hear and see something here. I'm going to put up the metering of both compressors. I've got them matched as far as the best attack and release as closely as I can, and both doing about 10 dB of gain reduction. So listen to this, also watch it visually, and then I'm going to share some thoughts on that. All right, RS124 first. So pretty close. Now, the interesting thing is I went all the way on the slowest setting on the compressor mode of the RS660, which is number 7 on the time constant. And the only way I could get the attack and release, at least visually on the VU meter, to be close is to again put the RS124 in superfuse mode, fastest attack, fastest release, which is not a setting I would typically use on bass. I would normally do like the 650A attack and superfuse off, and then start with the fastest release and try some of the slower ones before deciding there. But the interesting part is now, up to this point, is that to get the 660 and the RS124 somewhere within what seems to me like the same speed, attack, and release wise, you have to go superfuse in the fastest attack and fastest release on the RS124. Which is okay, but also a bit limiting, in my opinion. If you love the RS124 sound, you're not going to always use it on that setting. More will be revealed as we go here, but if that's the only way that the 660 gets into RS124 territory, then I'm going to say if you love the RS124 as much as I do, you're probably going to want to keep it or go with that one first and then add the 660 in later. But let's not make a judgment call yet. Let's keep going and see what we discover. But I want to hit play on the bass again, and I'm going to switch the RS124 on a setting that I would more normally use on bass, and just hear and see how different the speed is of the attack and release, even on the very slowest setting in compressor mode on the 660. All right, check it out. We're going to start with the 660 this time, and then we'll switch over. So as you can see and hear there, that's quite a bit different. Now, again, I'm getting a great sound out of either unit, but if what you love about the RS124 is how slow that release is and how slow the attack can be to let some of the transient through, you may not be able to get that out of the RS660 even at the slowest settings. Now, when I commit these bass files, I'm going to commit the sound that I want from the RS124 and the sound that I want from the 660. Since they're not matching up here, I'm not going to have them as close as we did on the drum aux track, but I think the point of this is not to sort of cripple one or the other to make it match the strength of the other, but to find something that we like in both. All right, on guitar, I'm going to dial something in on the RS124 and then focus on trying to match that on the 660. So on the drums, we were kind of trying to match the aggressiveness of the 660, because I really liked what I dialed in there on that review. On guitar, it's not really needing dynamic control as much as I'm just looking to add a tone from the compressor. So I'm going to dial something in on the RS124 and see if we can match that with the 660. All right, so we're on the 610 10B setting with a release speed of 4. And the idea being to hold out some of the sustain of the guitar. And let's see if we can get anywhere close to that on the 660. All right, so keep in mind, we're on the very slowest that we can go on the 660. So I'm going to dial back the release time towards faster on the RS124 and try to get an idea of where the slowest 660 speed is. All right, so it's kind of difficult to dial in the exact attack and release, but it seems like 3 on the release, at least on this guitar track, would be about the slowest that you could go on the 660. Let me back the 660 down to 6 and 5 and see what those look like in comparison to the RS124. Okay, it looks like to me that you have to go all the way on the fastest release on the RS124 to match around number 6 on the RS660. Let's go to 5, and I guess we may have to go into superfuse mode there to match. All right, so once you hit 5 on the 660, it's difficult to match the speed of the release even in superfuse mode. So I think as we've gotten this far, my thoughts are, if you love the RS124, I think you're going to obviously get some things out of the RS660 that you can't get out of the 124. The THD circuit, for example, and if you like the aggressiveness of the limiter, there's a little bit more speed there on the 660 that you're not going to get out of the 124. Now, even having said that, I felt like we could match the overall aggressiveness and sort of pumping on the drum bus example, and we're going to do the lead vocal next, and then we'll know for sure as far as matching that sound. But if you really like the sound of the RS124, I don't think you're going to really get into that territory with the 660 until you get to 6 and 7, which is great. I mean, to have any semblance of an RS124 in a primarily Fairchild compressor is just icing on the cake anyway. But again, for me, the RS124 is probably my favorite sound, my favorite tone ever. I don't know if I personally am going to be able to get enough RS124 flavor out of the 660 for it to be a replacement where I would sell the RS124. But let's check out the lead vocal. Let's see what we can do there as far as matching the two as close as possible. Okay, so now to lead vocal. Again, in the 660 review, we got something really special there, I felt. It just jumped out of the speakers. So let me start with the dry vocal, just to give you a sense of how that sounded real quick.
So now it's down to the wire.
And this is what we dialed in on the 660 in limiter mode on the fastest time constant.
So now it's down to the wire. Just one more trick for you all. I brought you smiles, your heart's desire. But hesitate now and I will fall.
Now it's hitting about 10 dB on the peaks, maybe going just a hair above sometimes. Now on the RS124, again, like we did on the drum bus example, the amount of gain reduction showing may be a little bit different. And keep in mind, you can see on the 660, my meter rests a little closer to 0 than it does on the RS124. Again, that's because of the unregulated power supply to match the originals. That's perfectly normal. Just depending on the voltage of where you live, it may rest a little high or low. But let's not get so caught up on if they're both compressing the same, because again, these are two different units. I don't think we're going to perfectly match the attack and release times, but we're going to try to match the aggressiveness and the overall sound. So let's go back and forth and see how close we can get here, starting with the 660.
So now it's down to the wire. So now it's down to the wire.
Okay, close. Definitely hear a little bit more smoothness on the RS124, which is not surprising. Again, we're on fastest attack, fastest release, superfuse mode, because that's as close as we're going to get to the speed of the limiter on time constant 1. So let me actually push it a little bit further. I don't think it's quite matching the aggressiveness yet.
So now it's down to the wire. So now it's down to the wire. So now it's down to the wire.
All right, getting closer. That may have been a little too far. Back off on that, and then I'm going to let it get into the higher pre-chorus and chorus parts to see if that reveals a little bit more of any differences or similarities.
So now it's down to the wire. Just one more trick for you all. I brought you smiles, your heart's desire. But hesitate now and I will fall, I will fall. So don't look down, 'cause here I go. I'm stepping turning round. Just take this soul and get its feet back on the ground. You stand in line to see the show, and why you chose me I'll never know. Was it to fill a hole in your life, to watch a star fall from the skies? Ooh, so don't look down, 'cause here I go. I'm stepping out, no turning round. Just take this soul and get its feet back on the ground. And when you realize that I'm flesh and blood, I'm only human, maybe then, well, maybe not. But I can't help that I'm falling. Loving arms slow me down. Is this my destiny calling? Will they watch me drown? Their stares are appalling. Greedy hands surround. Someone please save me. Don't look down, 'cause here I go.
All right, I think that's as close as we're going to get. The 660 is definitely handling the more dynamic parts in the pre-chorus and chorus better, but that's not surprising to me because the RS124 has never been a compressor that I was able to use by itself on a vocal. It's just not fast enough usually, but I really love putting it in front of something that is faster, like the Bluey, for example. All right, guys, this has been the RS660 versus RS124 comparison. I hope you found it informative. I hope you found it useful. I don't want to influence you too much one way or the other. I could totally see arguments for either compressor. And so I just hope you can take this, make the best decision possible, and get back to mixing. All right, guys, before you go, if you will, like the video, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell. If you like what I'm doing here, please consider telling a friend who likes pro audio about the channel. And whenever it's appropriate on the music forums and it fits into the discussion naturally, feel free to share the videos there. And I really appreciate when you guys do that. If you will, consider clicking the heart and donating to the channel. All right, guys, thank you for your time. I'll see you again soon. Take care.